Welcome, everybody. This is the first edition of the all-new Silver Screen Action Figure Podcast. I am Andre Joseph, award-winning filmmaker, actor, screenwriter. My co-host, he can introduce himself.
How's everything going, guys? My name's Albert Albanese. I a podcaster and help Andre with a bunch of his stuff when it comes to doing some of the film and stuff like that. So it's good to be here.
So, probably for anybody that knows us personally, they're probably asking themselves, what is this podcast and why are we specifically doing this on toys, in this case movie related toys? So this idea, it's been kind of brewing in my mind for a couple of years now. Originally, I was thinking about doing a documentary about the different defunct toy companies like Kenner and LJN, because they were the most infamous for making these licensed toys based on the movies that we all grew up on. Everybody knows of Star Wars. Everybody knows of the Marvel MCU figures, and even today's topic, which will be the history of the Batman franchise. So, everybody knows about that. But there's also like the little figures of films that people may not remember as well, or even didn't realize they had a toy line. So I always wanted to get to the point where I can interview some of these people that work for those companies and get some background info. Maybe even if I could see what the prototypes look like and figures that we never got because, the line got canceled, low sales, things like that. And, at the same time, I think I wanted to do a podcast again because I used to do, as everybody probably knows, I used to do the Cinephiles with Eric Cohen, Jeff Gellishaw, and Michael Fultz, and we would review movies all the time. And obviously, because everybody's lives got a little bit hectic, we weren't able to do it anymore. But I still have a great deal of love for those guys. So I wanted to kind of come up with this idea to combine my love for film as well as my love for those action figures. Because every time I've done interviews or done a Q&A session at a film festival, I would say the way I got started was me taking my action figures and reenacting everything that I saw in the film or even a TV show. And so, to have that kind of nostalgia kick as of late felt like the right time to kind of do it. So what's your experience with this, Albert? Yeah.
Well, also, the timing is really good, specifically because we're seeing a resurgence of a lot of these things. Kids that are our age, we're in our 30s, we grew up on LJN and we grew up on the Amigo Corporation, and these are actually now starting to get a resurgence. LJN's just started going back and making wrestling figures thanks to the guys called the Young Bucks, and the Amigo Corporation starting to put out new lines of stars from different TV shows and different movies and stuff like that. So now we're seeing a giant resurgence in the action figure collecting community, and it's becoming a big community for a lot of people who are our age that want to go back and capture the nostalgia of the stuff that we played with when we were kids.
Yeah, and it's funny too because I think there was a point maybe even after I got out of college, and we're talking about 2006, 2007, there sort of was a little bit of this shame that, hey, I still had these wrestling figures, I still had a lot of these old toys, and quite honestly didn't want to get rid of them because, they were such a huge staple of my childhood, and they were hard to get back then. But then you go to Comic-Con, and even friends that I made over time who are still collectors. I mean, whether they keep their figures in the box or not, that's another story for another day. But, there's these guys out there that are, they're still selling toys. They're making customs. They're our age, and they're still getting that kick. So, it's now there is no shame to say that you were a collector or that you love these toys. And especially, when it comes to wrestling, just on a side note, a big inspiration was the Major Wrestling Figure podcast with current WWE stars Zack Ryder and Kurt Hawkins, because they're our age. And here they are, they're going out there to all these flea markets and toy fairs, and they're buying out all the figures or even finding the old prototypes. And I just think, man, if I could hang out with those guys, I would have so much fun.
And that led us to actually going to a flea market a couple of months ago to start doing our own hunts of our own. Because listening to stuff like that got me back into the idea that, I want to recollect things from my childhood. So there I was, starting to, as they would say, scratch that figure itch and going out and buying old WWE Hasbro figures. Going back and buying, now I just started ordering stuff online. Actually, right before we did this podcast, Andre, I bought two Stomp figures and I bought an old original San Francisco Toy Makers ECW figure.
Oh my god.
I'm still I know. I'm still out there. I'm still collecting because this was the stuff from my childhood. There are things that I never got to have that I really wanted, and there are things that I had that I got rid of that I want back again. So the collecting community is really good. They're really supportive. If you guys look, you can find groups for just about any action figure collecting that you guys want to do on Facebook, on apps like Gemmer, and they're all out there. We're all out here, and here we are doing a podcast about all this kind of stuff, leading off with one of the staples of our childhood as it comes down to it, Batman.
Yeah, Batman. Oh my god. That this is I think this is the perfect way to start because this is particularly, I'd say, the one franchise that, basically its bread and butter has been made on merchandising right from the get-go. You go back to 1989 when the original Batman came out. Michael Keaton, Jack Nicholson, Kim Basinger, the Prince soundtrack. Tim Burton,
Oh,
who
yeah.
just was about to explode. And this was something that, before this, you had some figures that were based on the comic book, based on the Adam West television series. Remember, like there were the Mego figures. Kenner had their DC Superpowers line, which I think was based on the Super Friends cartoon. So they're very
Yeah.
colorful and they're also very rare collector items too. But they were very popular back in the early '80s. So basically everything changed when 1986 came around. Frank Miller came out with The Dark Knight Returns, and that showed a whole completely different side of the Dark Knight and the whole idea that Batman can be dark and gritty and more adult than what people were used to because they were still stuck in that Adam West phase. So that was the springboard
And
for,
just
yeah.
and just in general, people were caught up in the idea that these comic book characters were, yeah, they were for kids. And, at the time, you're talking about the 80s, where kids who grew up in, the 50s and the 60s with these comics are now getting of age to being older, and they grew up on this kind of stuff. So now they didn't want to go, see these characters still be made for kids. They wanted to see these characters updated for people their age. And now instead of just being like, hey, cool, that's Batman, he fights crime. It's, I understand the plight of Batman because of the loss that he had and, what drove him to be this character. And you got to live through that now. And Frank Miller's, depiction of the Dark Knight, and then eventually, like you said, what led to the Tim Burton movies, were more of an adult-oriented end to this kind of stuff. And it also spoke to the collectors of that age who were collecting toys and stuff as kids. And now there's a resurgence of that kind of stuff out there because of these movies and these shows and these comics.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, so I think when the first Batman movie came out, Toy Biz was the original licensor. So they were not only doing toys for the original Batman movie, but they were also doing the DC figures. And actually, I think a lot of it was like the molds from the Kenner Superpower line, and then they just sort of like put it to their own brand. And but Batman specifically was being made for the film. So I'm like looking at the pictures right now from that original line, and it's funny. '89, that summer, that's when you had like what I called the summer sequel bloodbath. It was, outside of Batman, it was just nothing but sequels. It was like Lethal Weapon 2, Ghostbusters 2, Karate Kid Part 3, Nightmare on Elm Street 5. They were like, everybody was like jumping on the sequel bandwagon. And Batman was like the one original movie that everybody ran out to see. It would become the highest grossing film of the year. And naturally, of course, you had to have a toy line with it, and Toy Biz was the first to do that. So, unlike the later lines that Kenner would do, we'll get into that in a moment. there weren't too many figures that were made. There were actually three variants of Batman himself, in that all black costume. And I believe two of the figures had like the utility belt that you could like pull and then you could hang them on stuff and it would wind back. Um, and actually, one of them, they kept changing the jawline on the figure. So there was like one that actually was like a round face, one that was a square face, and one that was like the Michael Keaton jawline. And nobody really knew the difference of any of them if you went into Toys R Us back then. So I think the one I had was the round face one. And as I
I
remember,
had the Michael Keaton one.
oh, you did, really?
Yeah, I did. I did.
Yeah, so I remember it was my birthday that year, and my parents they got me like almost the entire set, or at least the basics. They got me a Batman, they got me a Joker, they got me Bob the Goon, the only other henchman in it, and I might talk about him in a bit, and I had gotten the Batcave that year, and that was like one of the coolest play sets ever. I mean, unlike the later
I
one,
never had the
yeah.
Batcave. I'm so jealous. I love that thing.
Yeah, no, it was almost like if you had the Gray Skull play set for He-Man would be later, like the one for the Kenner line for the Batwing
Yes.
Manor. But this was just like basically it was like a gray little cave. It had like a little computer screen that you could actually like you could flip the sticker picture and it would have like screenshots from the movie. Um, there wasn't anything too crazy to it as far as like little weapons or gadgets. Just like a staircase and a platform. They kept it pretty basic for the most part. But at least it was something you could have to kind of reenact parts of the movie with. And there were a whole bunch of Batmobiles. In fact, the Batmobile they made for this line was very flimsy because I remember getting it, and 2 days into playing with it, one of the wings fell off. And I had to like use
Oh
some.
my God.
Yeah, the wing.
Same thing happened to me.
Exactly, and it had to get like the super glue to try to like stick it on, but it kept falling off half the time. So I stopped playing with it after a while.
Yeah, that was the one thing. It was the Batmobile specifically. I remember that kept happening to. I remember just playing with it because back in the day, playing with your figures was that's all you did. That was like your life. And I remember going there, sitting like in my basement and zooming the Batmobile across the floor, and it like hit into I don't know maybe like one of my dressers or whatever I had down there. And one of the wings fell off, and I was like, "What the hell's going on here?" And I was so upset because I had it for maybe like a month, and I was like, "I broke this already. My parents are gonna kill me."
Right, yeah, and apparently there were like two other versions of this thing. There was one where it actually the wings didn't break off in the back, but instead you actually could like spring load the car, and it would make like this little turbine sound. I don't think I had that one. I think it was just a basic like you just roll it around wherever you want. But this one you actually like you could wind back and then it'll just move. There was a remote control version, but I don't think you could put figures into it. And there was one that if you
Yeah, no, I don't think so.
yeah, and there was one that they came out with, and this was actually at the time this was really cool, and I think my cousin had this. They remember in the scene when he's in the chemical factory. This is like towards the end, and at one point the Batmobile has like that shield that covers over the car. And then I think like it
Yes,
drops the bombs from the wheel. So they had a toy like that, but it was just like this plastic covering of the mold of that shield, and you just put it over the car.
right. I remember exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, and it was pretty damn flimsy too. I think that stuff could like rip very easily, and obviously it would get dusty very quickly. And and then there was also there were two motorcycle cars for this line. There was a Bat cycle and there was a Joker cycle, neither of which was in the film. And I think they were basically the same mold, but like one was just like a all black motorcycle for Batman, and then the Joker cycle had like the Joker's head on the front of it. Um,
Yep.
and my cousin had the actual Bat cycle. I think he no, he doesn't have it anymore. He actually sold it in an auction. um, so yeah, that was that, and
Damn.
yeah, afraid so. And also
Yeah,
there was also a Joker van, which was actually kind of cool. It was just like a purple van, and the wheels would stick out. So like if you want to do like a tire slashing thing, it would have like the bumpers would come off. And funny thing about this was that later, when Toy Biz got the Marvel rights a year later, and they started doing like the Marvel superhero toys, they repainted that van into the Punisher battle van. And I remember that was like the
That's
coolest.
right.
Yeah, that was like absolutely one of the coolest vehicles ever. And when just on a side note, when they actually put the van in the Netflix show with John Barenthal, I flipped out. I was just like, holy shit, they finally
I
did
know it was so perfect.
Exactly.
But I remember also, yeah, I remember also with the that when I was younger, I didn't get the Joker the van. So what I wound up doing was taking the Ninja Turtles van that I had and use that as a Joker van, even though it was bigger and bulkier, but it was like really vibrant colors and stuff like that. And you got to use your imagination when you're a kid. So that was the Joker van, and I would chase them, and I would chase the Joker van around with the Batmobile.
I
Got to
could,
use your head.
yeah, yeah, and later, I mean, we're gonna do actually at some point we're gonna do an episode about the Turtles movie, toy lines, and also Beetlejuice, and I'm actually gonna talk about how I used some of the Ninja Turtles with the Beetlejuice figures. So stay tuned for that one, guys. A little teaser of what's ahead. Um, but yeah, I mean, definitely with the Toy Biz ones, there obviously there's some criticism about it as we're going about doing it, but like the Joker figure looked absolutely nothing like Jack Nicholson. There,
No, 0%.
yeah, 0%. Maybe because like Nicholson apparently, as many may or may not know, part of the deal for him to agree to play the Joker was that he would get a percentage of the actual gross of the film. So basically, safe to say he could have retired after this movie if he really wanted to, and he made a
Oh
crap
yeah.
ton of money. But at that time, Nicholson being Nicholson, one would be safe to say because these figures came out exactly at the time of the movie, and nobody knew how big this film was going to be. They probably couldn't license his likeness. So there was actually,
Right.
believe it or not, there were two versions of the Joker, and one had like a curl over his forehead, like the curl of his hair, and then one had no curl on it. And of course, none of them looked like
Yeah.
Nicholson. So, but one cool thing though,
And
yeah,
the one without the curl was thinner. The one with the curl was actually a little bit bulkier, like in the gut. He had the one without the curl had a little bit of thinner legs, and he had like a little bit of like a smaller face too.
yeah,
So
and
they were different. Like the molds for the figures were completely different too, which always shocked me because you figure they're going to try to use the molds as much as they possibly can, have extra parts laying around to try to put these together. But they changed the molds completely up for both of those figures.
yeah, it wasn't the same figure that had like you put the water in it and it would squirt out the water from the flower.
Yes, it did. It
Yeah,
came with the cane and the hat too.
yes, that's right. I do remember that now, and I think I kept losing the hat. It would always piss me off.
Yeah, I don't think I remember like not too long ago. I really wish I remember where a lot of my older toys went. I think I might have lost them when I moved, but I remember that I found the hat, but I couldn't find the figures. And then I put the hat somewhere, and then I couldn't find the hat, and then I just lost everything. So
Yeah. Now, with in regards to the Bob the Goon figure, now correct me if I'm wrong, but I think there may have been some controversy with this character at that time, because the other Batman films later on they didn't get too crazy with adding a henchman figure, so this was like the only one from that movie, and
yeah,
yeah, the Bob the Goon had like a gun and a knife, and obviously his trademark hat. And I think this figure actually got pulled from the shelves because it was just too scary for kids, or he looked too much like a street mugger, especially with the New York City crime rate at that time. It seemed like they were glorifying crime. Um, so I think there was some kind of whole like they had to pull the figure from the shelves, but I had it. I mean, it was one of the first figures I got, and it actually like it had like a spring loaded kick, and it looked probably of
yes,
all the figures, it looked exactly like the actor from the film.
it did. It actually looked the best out of all of them
Yeah,
until they came out with the Michael Keaton face, like the Michael Keaton jawline on the Batman. That was the best looking figure they had out of all of them.
yeah, without a doubt. I mean, they did an excellent job, I think, really capturing the look of the movie and not trying to make it all cutesy and light like the Adam West TV show. But some of the later figures, which we'll get into, started to kind of play around with that level of darkness quite a bit. So yeah, I mean, there are not too many other memories I have about the Toy Biz ones, other than the fact that I just got them for my birthday, and then my cousin got a couple of the figures, and then, we go to my grandmother's house, and then we'd start to play with them, and I borrow his bat cycle, he borrowed my Batmobile. Oh, and then also one other thing, the Batwing that came with this. So this was
Yeah.
also one of the coolest things because this had I think it had like a little joystick at the bottom that you pull out, and then it also had like a claw in the front. So if you wanted to capture the Joker, you could like literally grab it, just like how it grabs the balloons at the end of the movie.
Yeah, that was really always cool. I always try to use that like that was how he would grab him and then he'd pull him in and then he'd like try to drive away, but Joker would somehow get away. Like yeah, it's a lot of really fun interactive stuff that they came out with. On a toy line that at this point we're kind of in the infancy of what major toy lines we're going to wind up being. So this is a really good, it's a really good sign to see that they were trying to put all this thought into these different toys before we get to where we are now, where you can pretty much do almost anything you want with your action figures.
Well, yeah, not only that, but I mean, the figures they make today are just so much more accurate to the actors and with the way that the films look. I mean, it's almost like now you want to be a kid today to have all that stuff.
Oh yeah, and it's little things like as we've gotten older, points of articulation. A lot of these figures that we had, it was torso and their arms would move up and down, but you can't bend them at the elbow and you can't bend them at the knee. So, basically you can lift their leg and you can lift their arm, and that's pretty much all they could do. And now we're getting to a point where you can, fully pose these figures in your collection in any position that you want to, and they'll still find a way to make them stand up and stuff like that. So, I mean, you can see that the toy lines have come a long way. But back at this point in 1989, these were awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, no, and you got to also think too. I know as a kid, I mean, we're going to do Ghostbusters in a future episode too, but I remember being that summer, like I would have loved to have had, some Ghostbusters 2 action figures and, maybe like a museum play set so I could have them go up against Vigo and, have them in the black jumpsuits. But we didn't have that, But for Batman to come out, and it came out a week after after Ghostbusters 2 was released. And I remember me and my cousin and my dad went to go see both of those films one week after the other. So it was like Batman obviously left a bigger impression on me just all around. It was like perfectly well done. And so, that whole summer was like everybody was into it. And I hadn't really been a Batman fan before that. And next, I started watching the Adam West TV show. I started reading the comic books. So, no doubt the toys only added to that fandom that I started to have, not just for Batman, but also for comic books in general. Because before that, it was only Ghostbusters, RoboCop, and Thundercats, and maybe GI Joe to a certain
Yeah.
extent. But this really like opened up the spectrum for everything that I would get into later on in life. Um, so now we jump a year later. So Batman's still very popular. It's on tape. There's already the talks about the sequel. But then there's a switch up with the toy lines, and it happens that Kenner, which used to make the Superpowers lines, took the rights from Toy Biz, and then Toy Biz would go on to make the Marvel action figures, and that would become its own legend in itself. But the Kenner ones, it was a little confusing when they came out as the Dark Knight collection, and maybe as a kid I didn't really realize that they had switched toy makers, so it was kind of odd to suddenly see like there were these new sets of toys that were molded differently and had all these different variants, but yet they looked a million times better than what Toy Biz had put out. Um,
Oh yeah.
so I remember I forget what cartoon I was watching. It might have been DuckTales or Chippendale Rescue Rangers, and they had the commercial for these figures, and it was like I was almost blown away when I saw this. So you had like like I said, there were a bunch of different variants of Batman, but one that I remember was the one with the tech shield. That's where he had like this all gold armored suit, and you know,
Yeah.
it just on the commercial itself, it looked freaking amazing to watch. And then you had a Joker that actually looked like Jack Nicholson, and there was actually two versions of it. One that had a propeller that so you can make him pretend he's flying, but then you could also throw his face in water, so he would change color and look almost like Jack Napier in the film.
Yes.
Yeah, that was like really like
Yeah.
some magical shit.
Yeah. The thing that stuck out to me about this line too was also that we got the opportunity to have a Batman figure that was not just Batman, but it was Batman and Bruce Wayne.
Yes.
And that's the figure that I wound up getting too. You had the Bruce Wayne figure is how it just came, just regular Bruce Wayne. He had a black shirt with gray and a little red insignia on the side. And black pants, and that was pretty much it. So it just looked like, hey, Bruce Wayne just in a sweatshirt, just walking around. But then you can take the cowl and cape, his chest plate, the gloves, and put them on him, and bam, now he's Batman. So it gave us the opportunity now to do like little things like, hey, here's Bruce Wayne doing his Bruce Wayne stuff, and then all of a sudden out of nowhere, here comes Batman. Like, oh, it's time to go. Joker's acting up. It's time for Batman, and bang, you put on the helmet and the gloves and the chest plate and the boots, and you walked out, and then there you go. Now Batman's on the out on the prowl trying to take out the Joker. It was the coolest figure I ever had, and that one looked exactly like Michael Keaton, like to a T, completely perfect.
Yeah, dead on. It totally looked like him, and it allowed that opportunity. Now you have Bruce Wayne, and you could have just like chilling out in the Batcave, and then when you want him to be Batman, you switch figures. So
Right.
yeah, yeah. So I mean, they basically, like I said, there were a bunch of different variants, and I don't think I went outside of the one with the gold costume. I don't remember getting too crazy with collecting these. I just basically went with the basics. So I got the I think the Batman with the Thunder Whip, because it looked pretty much like the one
Okay.
from the movie. I mean, that was like the standard costume, and it had like the arm that would whirl, and I think it came with like a yeah, it was like a spinning arm, and it had like a I think like a ninja star and this little baton that he would throw around. So that was one of the ones I remember having, and there were also like a whole new set of vehicles. They had a new Batmobile that was much improved from the Toy Biz one, and actually it has the overhead cover of the car, so it has like the windshield and everything, which they did not have in the Toy Biz line, and
Yep.
it also it launched missiles, and it had the flame come out from the back, which is also really cool.
Yeah, that was awesome. I also what I remember was I was the same way as you. I didn't get a lot of the variant Batmans either because I always figured, well, I have Batman. How many Batmans do I need? I'd rather go out and get more. I remember as a kid, I was dying to find a Robin because in the comics and in the in the not in the movies obviously, but in the cartoons, there was always a Robin. And I was like, I need to find him, which I eventually wound up getting, a little when I was a little bit older once they started coming out with this kind of stuff. But this was the success of these toy lines just were breeding the idea that now all of a sudden they can go out and they can make more Batmans, they can make more Batman characters, and people are going to eat these up. And we did.
Yeah, this may have been also the beginning of where they were really. I mean, it would get crazier later on, but they would really start to try to overexpose and almost like just oversaturate the marketplace with all kinds of different variants of the Batman figures, and also like just these vehicles that they were cool to look at or even to play with, but they weren't in the movie, and I wanted the stuff that was actually in the film. So I didn't care for things like the Batjet or the Batcopter. That sounded like stuff that you would see in the TV show than the actual movie. Which because of
I agree.
budgets, you can only be limited in what you could do. And also, I would learn later on that a lot of the accessories that came with those figures were actually repaints from other Kenner lines. So they took like, say, weapons and accessories from RoboCop and Police Academy and Silverhawks, and they would like repaint them and pretend like they were part of the Batman franchise. Like, take for instance, there was a knockout Joker figure, and it came with this bazooka that would have like a punching bag, or actually a punching glove, and then you could like hit Batman
Yep,
with it. Well, apparently this
I have
bazooka,
that one.
yeah, this same bazooka was used in Police Academy for the Tackleberry character, and it was actually painted darker and actually added to more like the comedy aspect of the Police Academy movies and cartoon. So yeah, Kenner would be infamous for this, and they would do it with other toy lines outside of Batman as well.
A lot of companies started doing things like this. Once things started getting popular and they really wanted to cash in, there was a lot of issues with repaints of either the existing or other toy lines. We started seeing around like 1991 when, going into the Hasbro wrestling figure line, there was a lot of same body molds that were being used for different characters. So you look at a guy like Jake the Snake Roberts, and then they take his head out, put the Tito Santana head on it, and it's the exact same figure with a different head and a different paint scheme. This was something that they did to keep costs down, but it's also stuff that they did to try to gain as much as they could out of these toy lines, make as much money as they possibly could, because they had all this stuff laying around. They're not making Police Academy or anything like that anymore. Let's capitalize and let's put it out for the newer generation so we can move some of this stuff out of our warehouse and start to get turnover. Was it good for them? Sure, I'm sure they sold well. Was it good for us as kids? Not really, because you're right. I think I can't speak for everybody, and actually we can't speak for everybody. But I was the same as you. If I saw it on TV or I saw it in a movie, that's what I wanted. I would always go to the store and see these things that had nothing to do with them, and I'd look at my mom and be like, "No, I don't really want this. I don't even remember seeing this in the movie. This wasn't in there."
Yeah, it would just become too much, and it's like, look, I got like two or three or four different Batman figures. I don't need to have one that's in the snow or one that could swim. Just give me the basics, and and that would be something that actually many might know will ultimately backfire on this franchise before it resurrected itself. So we'll jump into 2 years later, and now we have Batman Returns coming out, and my God, I was hyped for this movie. Maybe too hyped.
Oh yeah.
Too hyped because when I saw it at Amboy Cinemas with my parents, and for whatever dumbass reason, I decided to sit in the front row to watch this movie and constantly had my neck looking up at the screen. And it was like the biggest mistake I ever made. It wasn't even like the movie was necessarily sold out, but I think it was just that event level status of, you know, this classic movie, and everybody wanting to know who was going to be the next villains, and what was going to happen. Was the Joker going to come back? I remember Nintendo came out with a Batman Return of the Joker video game, and I thought that was going to be the sequel, and it wasn't. So like basically, again,
You and me both.
yeah, nobody knew because there was no internet back then to know what was happening. So
And you're seeing these things that are being released by like you said, like Nintendo. It's like, oh, this has got to be what the next movie is going to be. And then you get to you watch the movie and you're like, oh, this is nothing like it. Okay.
yeah, you'd be so tricked into this stuff because that's how crazy it was starting to get. It was like any little thing of Batman was going to be like, you would have some expectation you're going to see this in the film. So, I think the first time I saw the trailer, it actually wasn't a trailer. It was just a preview, and it was on MTV. They were showing like the summer movies that were coming out, and they had the first clips of Batman Returns. So we got our first glimpse of Danny DeVito's Penguin and Michelle Pfeiffer's Catwoman. And I was like extremely hyped up for this movie so much. And then, it came out, and I remember liking it, but I also remember kind of like, this still feels a little awkward to me. It felt something was off. And it took me a couple of years to realize what exactly had happened. Maybe it took a decade before I realized what went wrong. And the film was hugely successful. It was like it had the biggest opening weekend in Warner Brothers history at that time. But then there was also kind of a drop off, and Then there was the backlash that came along with this film because the parents thought it was too scary. The Penguin was too scary. And the second they had a subplot where the Penguin wanted to kidnap Gotham's children and kill them, that was like, oh, this
Yep.
is too much, way too much. And then, you know, the infamous story about how because of the backlash, parents got upset with McDonald's because if you remember, McDonald's had like their little Happy Meal set, like the spring-loaded cars of like Batman in
Yep.
the I think either in a boat or a tank, and then it had the Penguin in the duck tank. Catwoman had like a car with a cat tail and stuff. So that I was able to grab those when they were first released, but then they were pulled out once McDonald's decided to pull out the whole promotion. But
And they
basically,
had a Robin cycle too, if I'm not mistaken, right?
I don't think that might have been for Batman Forever, but there is a Robin
Maybe.
figure. Yeah, we're gonna get into
I might
Robin
be
in
getting
this.
confused, but you're probably right.
Yeah, we're gonna get to Robin here in just a second, but just to give it some context here. So the first one was hugely successful, but Tim Burton basically had his hand forced with the first movie to make a commercial picture, and obviously it was hugely successful. But because they want him back for Batman Returns, he was refusing to do it unless they gave him creative freedom to make what he wanted. So the studio said
Right.
sure, and they wrote him a blank check, make whatever you want. And so his take was now it's still in continuity with the first film, but now it's more of a Tim Burton movie than the first movie in terms of the winter
Mhm.
setting, more emphasis on the villains this time around. Actually, more on to the whole backstory with the Penguin and being this outsider, and obviously the Catwoman tale and how dark of a twist that takes. So it was like he was really putting his own stamp into that film, and that probably was a turnoff for just parents and small children that were expecting more of the same from the first one. Not that the first movie was necessarily a kids movie, but I think it went into a slightly more darker and even maybe a slightly more violent direction than the first Batman movie.
Yeah, I mean, the sequel was definitely darker. It was definitely grittier. It was sexier. Michelle Pfeiffer in that patent leather cat suit. Penguin. Just oh man, just being one of the creepiest villains. I remember as a kid just being grossed out by him, and I remember as a kid just like I watched this movie 100 times with my dad because anytime it came on, I was like, oh, Batman's on. So I got excited and it's nostalgic for me and I loved this movie but I as I got older I realized kind of the same as you, this was a lot more of an adult oriented movie and you can see where parents were going to give a little bit of a backlash. And now you got to remember this is 91 this came out, right?
92.
So 92. So we're in we're now in 2019 where we're as a people are more overly sensitive. This was a less sensitive, set of adults who were looking at this and going, "This is too much." So it kind of did backfire a little bit. McDonald's wanted to cease their license with Batman. They pulled a lot of stuff. It suffered in the action figure department too because a lot of these kids who were really excited about this weren't allowed to see this movie because it was so violent, and they weren't allowed to get the action figures for it because parents didn't want to pay for things that were supporting something like this.
Right. So yeah, when it came to the figures, this was actually kind of weird, and maybe in a sense there was a little bit of false advertising behind them. So they were continuing off from the Dark Knight collection, and of course there were still plenty of variants of Batman, and some of the same ones they just repackaged. They actually had, I think I had gotten the Crime Attack Batman, which again was just the classic costume, but it had like a grappling hook that you could actually like shoot weapons with. You could shoot like a batarang or a claw, and that was like
Yep.
as close as you would get for the film. So I'm not going to get too deep into the Batman figures for this, and they re-released the Bruce Wayne one that we had. Let's talk
Right.
about the Penguin a bit. So they wanted Burton wanted his Penguin to be pretty damn creepy and not like when you hear Danny DeVito's playing it, you're thinking of he's going to be like the Burgess Meredith Penguin and probably fit whatever mold that they were going to do. And they didn't do that. He was
No.
creepy as hell, with that big nose, the rotted teeth. Obviously, a very dark look. I mean, like the guy lives in the sewers, so clearly, there's definitely a lot of defects, physical defects about him. And I guess because either they didn't want to spoil his look, or that maybe they were afraid of the backlash that was about to happen, they decided to take the Penguin from the DC Superpowers line and just repaint it in black and red.
Yeah.
And it was the same accessories with the umbrella that sprung out. And I still bought it anyway because it was the Penguin. But I gotta admit, I was kind of really ticked off that they didn't go with the Danny DeVito one. And I think maybe it was the same situation too with Nicholson, where his likeness was just too expensive to obtain, so they just decided, let's just take the old one and repaint it.
Yeah, and I did like the idea that they had the cloth accessory with it, though.
Yeah,
that was always cool for me. Like, that was a nice little touch. But yeah, I was a little bit disappointed because it didn't really look like what was on the screen. The idea of the cloth accessory to take off this jacket and stuff like that was a nice little add-on. But for the most part, it just didn't look like Penguin to me. I never got it. My cousins had it, and I remember playing with it at his house. And like I said, the jacket was the only thing that really stuck out to me. I didn't like you couldn't take the hat off either. It's those little things as a kid that, you want to do, because he took his hat off in the movie and stuff like that. You want to, recreate these things, and you can't do it. But for the most part, I don't know. I wasn't crazy about it. I think that the Catwoman figure was a lot better done than the Penguin one.
Yeah, so funny thing about the Catwoman figure, it didn't get released with the initial line, because I think it may have been the same situation where, because she's in this skin-tight leather outfit and clearly looks like a dominatrix, I think, Kenner was afraid to put this thing out right away, and also the fact that, female action figures weren't always big sellers. But then the movie came out, and everybody raved about Michelle Pfeiffer's performance. And then there was the talk of the spinoff movie, which, of course, did not happen at that time. So I think as a result of the praise that she got, they eventually gave her figure. And I'd say, arguably, it's the best one in the entire line.
I agree.
Yeah, down to the whip, down to the look with the costume, getting her likeness right. It's weird they didn't even make any variants of her, because Catwoman could have stood on her own with her own action figure line.
I agree.
And also another cool figure they had the Penguin Commandos. Remember that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, they had the little penguin henchmen, I would say, and they would come with like the missiles that they would fire off, like they'd have at the end of the movie when they're trying to blow up the bat boat. And I remember they were so cute. You didn't really want to do anything with them. You didn't want to beat them up because it's the penguins.
Yeah, exactly. You kind of just wanted to be like, all right, let's kind of just kick these guys out of the way, and that's it. I happen to be a big fan of penguins. They're one of my favorite animals. I think they're adorable. So I was like, I don't want to beat this guy up too much.
Yeah, because it was just like even in the video games that came out at that time, they would have like penguins trying to shoot at you from the background, and you couldn't even touch them. So half the time you're just fighting the penguins' circus goons.
Right. Another thing I did like about these was the actual packaging. It was really, I think that gets a lot lost for a lot of people, especially for me, because I'm not a mint on card collector or a mint in box collector. I'm a loose collector. I open all my toys because toys, deserve to be opened and played with. That's what they're there for. They're not there to sit in boxes. And as they say on the Major Wrestling Figure podcast, I let mine breathe. But the packaging for these were really cool, especially the Catwoman one, where she's on there, she's got the whip in her hand, she's whipping it around, she's got the bat symbol in the corner. The writing was in like that Gothic script looking in gold. They were cool packages, like caught your eye walking down the toy aisle, and that's something that a lot of people don't take for granted, because a lot of people just they're like, oh well, it's a Batman toy, so of course they're going to be looking for it. No, like these are the things that caught your eye as a kid going down the aisle. You saw like a plain black package, and with something in it, and you're like, oh, okay, cool. But these stood out.
That's true. I remember, like, even in Toys R Us when the movie was about to come out, and I saw the figures displayed there, and had the Batman Returns logo on it. That's when I just started snatching them because, like, holy shit, this is the Batman sequel. I got to go get these right away. So there's definitely the way that they were designed, and even the ones with the Toy Biz line. There was a great deal of appeal when you looked at those packages. But yeah, I mean, I didn't care about them being mint in the box. I wanted to play with them and I wanted to reenact the movie.
Oh, absolutely. I think that's, look, there are two schools of thought. And it's funny because my father and I are of the opposite schools of thought. My father was always like, keep these things in the package because they're going to be worth something one day. And my school of thought was, I don't care if they're worth anything. I'll never sell my toys because, when you're a kid, you don't think you'd ever want to do that. But you're like, I don't want to play with them. And that's what I did. I never kept anything in the package. And, not for nothing, it's not like these became high in demand. The Batman figure that we talked about from the Batman Returns with the black shirt, because the purple shirt was the remake for the 1992 one.
Right.
But the one with the black shirt that I talked about before, you can find on eBay mint in box for $30. So it's not like there's a huge markup on a lot of these. So I was always one of those people that just took them out and let it breathe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we talk about controversial figures, and we talk about the Penguin being recycled from the old line. Let's talk about Robin in here. Okay.
Let's talk about Robin.
Yeah, so this is probably like the biggest false advertising ever for any movie toy line, I would say. So there were rumors at that time that they were going to put Robin in the movie. And what we learned later on was that, yes, there was a plan to put him in the film. And apparently in an earlier draft, they were going to make him African American. He was going to be part of like a street gang, and he was going to have like a mechanic suit with the R symbol on it. And apparently Marlon Wayans, of all people, who nobody really knew of Marlon Wayans at that time, got cast as Dick Grayson. But then Tim Burton decided just before production to just cut him out. Apparently I think Burton and even Michael Keaton were never fans of the Robin character, so there was always sort of like the resistance to have him in it. And then it becomes like 8 million different characters. And actually I think even with the original film, they had him written in, and they were looking at Kiefer Sutherland to play Robin, and then that didn't happen. So
I never heard that, actually. That's crazy.
Yeah, it was an early design, because I remember if you go on YouTube, they actually have the storyboards of what that whole sequence was going to look like, of incorporating Dick Grayson's origin with a chase scene involving Batman and the Joker. And they got Kevin Conroy and Mark Hamill to do the voices for this animated sequence. It's actually on a special edition DVD for the original Batman. It's definitely cool if you could check it out. So
I'm definitely going to.
Yeah, no, it's great. So instead of, because they didn't have Robin in the movie, they had in the comic books, obviously there was a switch up with different guys in the Robin character. You had Jason Todd, he got killed, and at that point they had Tim Drake, and Tim Drake was very popular, so they decided to suddenly decide to release a Robin figure based on the Tim Drake interpretation. And they sculpted it just like in the comic book, and they introduced it in the toy line. Now, I remember as a kid, I was like, wait, Robin's in the movie? Like, what the hell is going on? Yeah, and then you don't see him, and it's like, what the hell is happening? Like, why are you advertising Robin in the toy lines when he's not even in the film?
Yeah, I never understood that, because I wound up getting that Robin figure because, like I had said, as a kid, I watched the cartoons and stuff like that. I wanted a Robin. Batman needed his tag team partner. Batman needed his sidekick. And, I wanted to make my own stories instead of just, recreating the ones that we saw on screen. And I wanted Robin. And once I finally got him, really cool figure, don't get me wrong, it came with the it was in a grappling hook, right? Like a shot out, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, it was the grappling hook. It had the cape.
Yes. And I was super excited And then I was like, well, he's not in the movie. This kind of stinks.
Yeah, but I will say the cool thing at that time was if you actually had to role play his role in the film with those figures, because I would do the whole thing where um, you would take the toys, even the toys from the first movie, and then you'd start doing like different storylines and team ups, have like a big like Royal Rumble kind of deal in the Batcave. So I would always try to play around with that sort of thing. Like if Robin was in the film and he tag teams with Batman up against the Penguin and Catwoman, what would that be like? So I can't see it in the
Right.
movie, but I can recreate it, in my room.
And the cool other thing was at that point, what you could do is you can take like you said, the figures from the original line, like the Joker, and bring them back. And how did he interact? When would they get along? Would they turn on each other? They were both villains. They were both scoundrels. What winds up happening? So you could recreate like that whole idea. Maybe it makes it a little bit easier for Batman and Robin to catch them. What if Catwoman didn't, stay, on their side and decided to turn their back on them too? There was so many different things you can do, but the introduction of Robin in the toy line gave you a lot more things you could do with your figures. It was just really upsetting as a kid to not see him translate onto the screen. Of course, later on, I'd wish I would have never seen it, but that's besides the point.
Yeah. Yeah, so now like the vehicles in this line, they were kind of a mixed bag, I would say. So you had a new Batmobile, and this I didn't have it, but my cousin did. It was a Batmobile that actually it would break apart and turn into the Bat missile from the movie. So like the sides would come off and detach, and then it would just be like the one little thing in the middle. Yeah, so that was like really a cool vehicle, even though it is kind of phallic to look at now, I will say.
Yes, yes, it is.
Yeah, yeah, it's funny. My cousin must have gotten all the vehicles for this one, and not me. It's because he had the Batmobile, he got the Bat ski boat, which I was really jealous of him to get, and it looked exactly
That's
like the one from the movie. With the missiles and the torpedoes. It had the thing like that slides under. That was probably one of the best vehicles they made for this.
And I would say one of the worst ones was the Penguin
Oh
Duckmobile.
my god. Well, they didn't even make a Duckmobile toy, weirdly enough. They gave him an umbrella jet, which wasn't even in the film.
Yeah, that too. I never got that either.
Yeah, that was like really a strange thing. But they made like die-cast toys of that duck boat, but nothing else. Like that, I guess because it was the same deal that they didn't want it to be so connected to the Danny DeVito interpretation. I can't figure it out for the life of me why they decided to do that, but maybe it was just again they were afraid of the backlash from it. And there was also a Bruce Wayne car, and it was a custom coupe where you put him in the car. I think this is where it came with the Bruce Wayne with the purple shirt. You put him in,
Yes,
and then I forget exactly what you do with it, but I think like the chair slides, and then he could turn into Batman.
yes.
Yeah, yeah. I didn't have this, but when Kenner did the Superman toy line a few years later, they actually repainted or remolded this car. So it'd be like the Clark Kent car, and then you put him in, and then he could turn the Superman inside.
Of course, there's always that, the repaint for the guy who's got to hide and put on his costume. So that totally makes sense.
Yeah. And yeah, so now I think we come to like maybe the best part of this particular line, and that's the Wayne Manor. So now this is a huge
Yeah.
improvement over the Toy Biz Batcave. So this would be like one that would fold out, and the front of it basically has the look of the outside of Wayne Manor. And then when you open it up, you have one section of it which is like the hallway, and it has like a trap door through a clock, and then you flip it the other way, and then suddenly you're inside the Batcave, and it's kind of similar to the Toy Biz one, but with a computer screen and everything that looks more closer to the movie. And then on the back side of the place set, there's like this little. It looks like the chemical factory from the first film. So I would always try to reenact the first movie on this. Uh,
Yeah, definitely.
yeah, and it was just like with the stickers, the detailing. This was undoubtedly the place that they would stick with for future lines going forward. And again, the stickers are screenshots from the movie, and yeah, you would absolutely take this, and then when they actually repainted it for the animated series, I didn't even bother buying an extra one. I just stuck with this, and this would be my Batcave for the rest of the franchise going forward.
Oh no, it was perfect, absolutely perfect. Like you, this was the Batman playset of all Batman playsets. I remember I never had this. My cousin did, and I was supremely jealous. And it's the only thing I ever wanted to do when I went to his house. Remember, he right around that time. That's when I think when Game Gear got pretty popular, and he was sitting there playing. He was like, "Oh, do you want to play Sonic?" I was like, "No, I want to play with the Batman thing." Like, this is the coolest thing. And I remember this was like the playset that I played with more than any other Batman playset ever. It's one of the ones that I want to go back and get once I have a little bit more room to start displaying a lot of my stuff, because this was so cool, so much detail. Like you said, the stickers, everything that they put in there made it look so realistic and true to the film. It was fantastic. It was one of the best play sets ever.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, it was just one of those things that I would sometimes even recycle this playset for other toy lines. I think I may have used it for some of the Marvel stuff that I had. And actually, for a while, I did use this as the X-Men Mansion before I got that playset. So because
Well,
it
that
looked
makes sense.
identical. Yeah, so you would almost like take the front and maybe the side, and it would be like Xavier's School for the Gifted. So it was a lot of purposes that I could use this for. It wasn't just for Batman. Now, before I jump into Batman Forever, obviously there was another Batman movie before that, and that was Mask of the Phantasm, the animated film. Uh, so I guess
Yes.
just a little context about this. So right after Batman Returns came out, we had Batman the Animated Series, and that would become a life of its own. Some would say maybe the best interpretation of Batman ever, and it spawned a toy line that really enhanced the popularity of the brand. And kind of same deal with having different variants, but you had more villains, you had more of the side characters like Robin and Batgirl. So those were definitely like not only collector's items, but they were big pickups for me as a kid.
Oh, same here. I loved the cartoon series growing up. It was one of the things that really got me stronger into Batman, because the movies were great, but this isn't, we're talking, 1992, 1993 here, guys. This isn't like we can just throw a movie up on Netflix and just watch it whenever we want. We can only watch these movies if we got them on VHS, which I never did. My parents never got me them on VHS. So I had to watch it whenever it was on HBO. And that was the only time you would ever get to watch some of these films, was if they were on cable. So the cartoon really got me deeper into the Batman series, because at that point, now I'm able to, hey, here we go. Just throw it in and and watch this. And now I'm being introduced to characters, because I wasn't reading comics at the time, that I never heard of. And it was really cool to see some of these older characters come back, like Joker, and some of these new characters like Clayface, take the form on the screen. And then the toys that came out with them were just amazing. It was led to some of the better toys that were ever made.
Yeah, and definitely the most detailed in terms of capturing the closeness of the cartoon. So yeah, like there was the animated Mask of the Phantasm movie, which at the time was not successful because it came out around Christmas, and I think maybe adults dismissed it as a kids movie, but actually, it's pretty damn dark and brutal compared to the cartoon. And
Oh yeah.
yeah, and I remember seeing that in the theater with my dad and my cousin. And I think, we might have missed like the first couple of minutes of it, but I already knew what was going to happen because I had already bought the comic book adaptation right before, so I already spoiled myself with the film. But the toys themselves, now it was mostly a lot of repaints from the animated series, but many of which was influenced from this movie. So you actually had a decoy Batman, which was basically the animated Bruce Wayne that you would put like this red painted Batman top over him, and his head would shrink, and then he would basically turn into like a samurai looking Batman figure. And then there was like actually two versions of the Joker that came with a jetpack, And I remember having one of these, and there was one with a green face and there was one with a white face, and I believe I had the regular white face one. But the big standout was the Phantasm itself, because this was like basically with certain toy lines, certain figures would not be released until after the movie because they would have like a spoiler in it. So, like, say with Dick Tracy, which we'll
Right.
talk about in a future episode, they had the blank figure, but nobody could ever get the blank. And then if you saw the movie, you would know why it was so hard to get. So, the
Right.
Phantasm figure was a big giant spoiler because the way it was advertised, you weren't supposed to know who the Phantasm was, but then you buy the figure, and clearly you would detach its head, and it would be his love interest in the film. If you haven't seen it, sorry, spoilers if you haven't seen the movie.
Now, look, you're spoiling a movie that's over 20 years old. I think we can deal with that. Yeah, no, definitely, and that's the one that we'll probably end up talking about throughout a lot of these things, especially when we're talking about toys from movie series. Even today, to this point, we'll get certain things spoiled or confirmed that we think is going to happen in future movies, and this is like really talking about the Marvel franchise through the toy lines. The Marvel franchise will release a new Funko Pop for the next Infinity War movie, and it's like, oh well, that confirms that this character is coming back, or that confirms that this character is going to look like this. This is going to confirm that Hawkeye is going to be Ronin now, and not that it happened with the action figures, but it definitely could have happened, at that point. And you saw a lot of that at this point, figures being released before movies came out, and you're sitting there and you're looking at it and going, what's that going to do? When's that going to be in the movie? For some of them, they were a red herring, like you said, with the Robin figure. For some of them, they kind of spoiled a little bit of the movie, and you either knew about it and could put two and two together, or you didn't know, and you were like, well, what's this going to be? And then you went to go see the movie, and you found out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. So yeah, I mean, basically, there's not too much to say about Phantasm because there was only just those handful of figures, and the Phantasm was pretty hard to find. I would assume it's pretty damn expensive to get if you're ever in a toy store. So now let's jump into Batman Forever because this is where it really started. I would say this is the point when Kenner started to have a lot of influence on the Batman movies themselves. Uh, so
Yeah.
so after the sort of backlash to Batman Returns, Warner Brothers decided, the films are getting too dark. Burton, maybe it's time to move on to something else. Let's hire Joel Schumacher so he can make it more kid friendly. And I would say without a doubt that the popularity of the cartoon made Warner Brothers realize that if they kind of toned down the darkness of the films, they could do better business in merchandising. So it was basically Joel Schumacher coming in. At this point, Michael Keaton said, I don't agree with this vision. I'm out. And yeah, $50 million. I'll get it another time. I don't need to, make a movie I don't believe in. So Val Kilmer becomes the new Batman. And
And
yeah,
just to kind of touch on that, Michael Keaton was, he was semi-known before Batman. That launched Michael Keaton. Michael Keaton being Batman was like this is a huge step for his career. To kind of turn down that money was a big deal. Everybody was like, man, this is the film franchise that made this guy, and he doesn't want to do it. I wonder, what's going on with that. And in all honesty, Val Kilmer stepped in admirably. I didn't hate him as Batman, but I think a lot of people just you associated at that point Michael Keaton as Batman. So, Tim Burton being out, Joel Schumacher being in, Michael Keaton being out, Val Kilmer being in, that was a lot of concern for people who are a little bit older. As a kid, I didn't care. There was a new Batman movie coming out, and that means there were new Batman villains, and that means there were new Batman toys, and that's what I was excited about.
well, yeah, and I think even in Keaton's case, I remember there was, much like with Affleck, who just recently left the role, there was the whole backlash with casting him back in '88 because he'd been mostly known for comedy roles. I mean, he played
Right.
Beetlejuice, he was in Mr. Mom, so nobody thought he was going to do it. And, you know, for him, he thought, I'm doing the Adam West movie. I'm not really taking this seriously until he read the Frank Miller comic and said, "Oh, it's this take. I'm gonna do this.
Right.
So like he comes into it, and yeah, as a kid in '89 through '92, he was my Batman. And any other movie I saw him in, I couldn't see him as anything else but that role. So when he turned it down, when he turned Batman Forever, I remember being disappointed about it for the moment. And it certainly did have an effect on his career because, next couple movies he did all tanked other than Jackie Brown. And it wasn't until
Yep.
like a decade later, when Birdman brought him back, and thankfully he's a star again. But yeah, I mean, it was kind of like a fuck you to the industry when he decided to back out. And then Kilmer coming in, I didn't know what to think. I mean, I wasn't that familiar with his work outside of, let's say, The Doors or Top Gun. Obviously, his role as Doc Holliday in Tombstone is what got him the part. But once I saw that first trailer, I pretty much accepted him right away in the part. I think I was just more enamored by the fact that, yes, we're getting the Riddler, and it's Jim Carrey at the height of his popularity. And we got Two
Yes.
Face, and we got finally get Robin in it. So it was like so much eye candy in that first trailer. It was like, holy shit, I'm gonna see this movie. And then when the toys hit, they came out earlier than expected. They must have come out like early part of 1995, and I was in a Warner Brothers store in Woodbridge Mall. And as soon as I saw those figures, I said, I gotta grab these. But they were like ridiculously priced back then. So I was only able to get like the Batman with the sonar sensor because that was the only one that looked close to his costume. And
Yep.
screw the rest of them. I just wanted that, and I wanted a Riddler, and I wanted Two Face and a Robin. So I got those, and then little by little, I started collecting them.
And this was now the launch for the Robin character on screen.
Right.
And this was really the big launch of him in the toy line because now everybody wants a Robin because, oh, well, Robin's in the movie.
Right, but there may have been like a semi small backlash with at least the street biker Robin, which was essentially just it's Dick Grayson without the costume, because
Right.
they obviously went a little different from the comic where he had like really short hair, he had an earring, and obviously people think, are they making Robin gay here? Like, what's going on? The,
Yeah, there was a lot of that, but I think a lot of other people saw it as, oh, he's edgy, and they don't need it to put him in a leotard in order to make him superhero. I think it was the idea though this could be anybody.
yeah, they were trying to go like this rock and roll direction with Batman at this point, and I think there was. So I remember I got that, and then I got I think the Hydro Claw Robin because again that was like closer to his costume.
Yeah.
They had the Two Face one was actually pretty good because I thought that looked pretty much like his costume, and it looked like Tommy Lee Jones.
Yeah, it really did. That was a really good one. The Riddler was a little disappointing for me, though.
Yes, let's talk about the Riddler. So the first Riddler figure they had, it was Trapping Brain Drain helmet Riddler. This was he had the classic hat and the green costume, and he had like this little monitor that was pasted to his chest. And I forget what
Yep.
accessories it came with, but it looked nothing like Jim Carrey whatsoever.
I think it came with that question mark bazooka. Am I right?
I think it.
Is that the right one?
Uh, No, this is the one that you put like a backpack on his back, and then it has like a claw that it comes down, and you put like over Batman's head. It's supposed to like drain his brain.
Oh, right,
Yeah,
right. Yeah. That's right. That's right. Yeah.
yeah, that was the first one that came out. But then, ironically enough, they wait until like later in the year to do a 2-pack with Robin. I mean, with the Riddler and Two Face, and so at that point, it had more Jim Carrey's likeness from the movie because it had the flat
Oh,
top
yeah.
head, it had the cane, the full green outfit. So I didn't have that one, and I'm still pissed that I never bought it because I remember seeing that in a whole collection in a clearance aisle at Toys R Us. And at this point, I was sort of like ready to move on from Batman, and I'm still kicking myself that I never bought it.
Listen, we can do an entire series on things that we wish we would have picked up, but we didn't. I mean, we can talk about the Hasbro's wrestling figures. It used to be like like 3 for $5, like at the end when they lost their license, and I didn't get any of them, like an idiot, because I was like, oh, I don't want these anymore.
Mm-hmm.
But this was a big one. Just to throw it out there, I think they you can probably find them on eBay or on Amazon, and they're probably not too badly priced. But this was the Riddler. I remember getting this because it was the green leotard with all the question marks on it, the red hair. It had the stick. Tommy Lee Jones looked amazing.
Yeah.
That figure was awesome. It had the half purple face. It had the gray hair. It had the half black suit and the half like golden, like silverish, grayish suit on the other side. These were the figures. These were the awesome, like, these are the ones that I wanted, I never got too. That really like turned me off the figure line. I was like, oh, these are the villains.
Yeah, I mean, they were definitely like the most accurate to the film. And also another thing to note too is that at this point, they really like overhauled the molds of the figures. So they weren't taking, the Dark Knight collection toys and repainting them and just having different variants. These were completely all new variants of Batman and the subsequent villains. So they may have had like new makers at Kenner that were doing this. So
right, I think they completely ditched the old. It was like an out with the old and in with the new thing, I think, with this series completely. And I think that was just because of the idea that this is a brand new Batman, a brand new director, a brand new movie. We got to do a brand new toy line.
Exactly. Yeah, and they also had like a new Bruce Wayne figure that had more Val Kilmer's likeness, and it was the same thing where like his head would shrink, you put like the Batman top over him, and he'd have almost like a samurai suit. I would even say close to like the Dark Knight Returns outfit, but just painted in blue.
Yeah.
So
Definitely.
I remember having that, and there was also plenty of Robin figures at this point, plenty of like transforming Dick Graysons, and there was a new Batcave. They actually had two Batcaves. They had a repainted version of the Batman Returns Batcave, but then they had like a separate one, and it was really loose because it had a like a wire hanging that you could actually have like guys slide down from like the top floor to the bottom floor. I never bought that because that was like ridiculously priced at Toys R Us, but it looked like one of those things that might have been pretty flimsy if you bought it, and then it would easily break down.
Oh yeah, I completely agree. It didn't look. I don't know. It looked very poorly made, and this harkens back to the original line with that Batmobile, where it looked a little bit, on the shoddy side.
Yeah, and then this was also at this time, Kenner was doing what they call deluxe figures, which were just basically they were the same size figures as the normal basic toys, but they were adding like bigger accessories to them. And they would do this with Star Wars. They would do this with a couple of other lines at that time. And I didn't buy any of these, but there was a Riddler figure that actually it could talk, and it had like this big ass question mark cane. I never seen this in the store. I think you can only get it in like the Warner Brothers store.
Yeah, I think that was one of those. Back in the day, we didn't know a lot about this, but there was exclusives. You can get certain toys in certain places. That's really big now with a lot of lines now. Certain places have certain licenses with certain toy lines. So you'll hear sometimes with, and I'm going to keep harkening this back to anything to do with WWE because it's where most of my toy knowledge came from. But you hear now it's a Walmart exclusive or a Target exclusive. This certain figure is only going to be sold in these certain stores. We didn't know about that back in the day. This was before the internet, kids. So we had to just walk around and figure it out. The coolest thing you would ever get, and it's what you brought up before, was walking into a toy store, walking down the toy aisle and going, "Oh my God, there's new Batman figures out!" Mm-hmm. I didn't know these were coming out because we never knew they were coming out.
Right. Yeah, and then if you also remember with the film, they decided to throw everything, including the kitchen sink, when it came to the vehicle. So now you had a redesigned Batmobile, which I still have. It's actually on a display case. And
awesome.
Yeah, and I still prefer the Tim Burton one a little bit more, actually a lot more. But it was still a cool vehicle. But the wings on the back were even more flimsier than the Toy Biz one. I could say that right now.
Yes, they were.
They were flimsy, but they didn't break to the point where you had to put crazy glue on it. They, just it comes apart, and you just a little hook in the bottom. You just put it back on.
Yeah, you snap it right back in.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And of course, the movie went crazy with the vehicles when it came to, like, they had the Batwing at the end. They had a new Bat ski boat, so they made figures for vehicles for that, and they actually sold all three at once in a package. And
yeah, which was awesome. What a great idea.
Great idea, but ridiculously expensive if you went to a store to try to buy it. And then they had this Robin cycle, which wasn't even in the movie. I mean, it looks like this, like a buzzsaw. I don't even understand the thinking behind that one.
That was probably left over from another toy line. That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, so I mean, in a nutshell, that was Batman Forever. I mean, everything kind of got changed up from there, and the movie actually, it did at that time save the franchise quite a bit, because it showed that, hey, the lighter direction meant more money, better merchandising. The Seal song "Kiss from a Rose" was like a huge thing on the charts, and that was big.
Yeah.
In any '90s collection of greatest songs, it's going to be on there. That's the one memorable thing about it. And the movie itself, I watched it again quite a few years ago. It's not as bad as people want to throw it out to be. I still think, yeah, it started going into that direction of being too light, too comedic, the bat nipples and all that. But,
yeah.
I think Val Kilmer did a pretty good job in the role. I think he knew in his head where he wanted the character to go and what he wanted him to be interpreted as. It's just the rest of the movie around him, it became more about, let's just try to please the kids. But his version could have been almost rival to what Christian Bale would do later on.
Yeah, I think it kept the movie series going. And for a little while, I was actually happy with the prospect of having Val Kilmer as my Batman for a little while longer. Then we found out that wasn't the case, and oh boy, were we ever in for a shock?
Yeah, so that kind of leads us to the beginning of the end of what we're getting into, because 2 years later we get Batman and Robin. And if you've heard a lot of the backstories now, Joel Schumacher even has admitted that Kenner had a big influence on the overall production design of this movie. So Warner Brothers allowed them to redesign the costumes, redesign the vehicles, make any decisions that they thought were going to be good for selling merchandising. And boy, did this shit backfire big time.
Oh, did it ever.
So, as I remember, I think that I went to camp this year, and it was summer '97. So I don't remember if I saw the movie before or after. I think it had to be before, because when I left camp, I saw Men in Black. And again, it was another movie that I was hyped up for originally, because, we're getting Mr. Freeze, we're getting Poison Ivy, you got Schwarzenegger playing Mr. Freeze. Then I was pissed off to hear that Val Kilmer was not playing the role again, and I didn't know why. And obviously, him and Schumacher butted heads, and we end up with George Clooney. And it's like, it's too damn soon to change actors now. And, Clooney to me was the guy on ER. I didn't really think he was Bruce Wayne in my head, but I'm like, what the hell?
Yeah.
It's still Batman. I'm still gonna buy the toys. It should be fun. Boy, was I in for a shock.
Yeah. There was disappointment all around with that film. The Val Kilmer being out, Schumacher staying on, the influence of the toy line to try to redesign a lot of the things that we grew up with. Chris O'Donnell, finally we got. I was actually excited to get finally a full suited Robin on screen. This was going to be cool. We get Robin in his own suit, but then there's Alicia Silverstone as Batgirl, and there's all these other little things that they put into this movie where they were shoving way too much into one. Because Bane was in this movie too.
Yeah,
we forget about that.
I remember.
We forget about the fact.
Yeah, I remember
that Bane was in there.
when the trailer hit and they showed that shot of him at the end when he's trying to like, lift up the bat signal, I got hyped up like, holy shit, they got Bane in the movie. And then you see the film, he's like a fucking joke.
I know, and it was such a big letdown in so many different ways. Mr. Freeze being Arnold Schwarzenegger, I was like, oh, that's an odd casting choice. I didn't mind Uma Thurman in her role. I thought that was okay, as far as casting, but everything else just like shocked me. I was like, I don't know. I mean, it was worse than I thought it was going to be, and I didn't have too high expectations to begin with.
Yeah, so I think I had made the mistake before the movie came out, thinking it was going to be pretty good, and I still went and bought some of the figures, not all, but I bought like the Batman hover attack because again, he looked like the one in the movie, so I was going to get that. They had a Mr. Freeze figure, but it looked nothing like Schwarzenegger. It was the Ice Blast
No, not at all.
Mr. Freeze. And he was painted in blue. He wasn't like, the steely metallic white and blue from the movie.
Right, which they ended up coming out with after that.
Yeah, afterwards, they had like those 2-packs where it looked closer to Schwarzenegger.
Yeah. I love Sonic Batmobile. That was a cool, like, that was one of the cooler Batmobiles they came out with.
Yeah.
For this line. But other than that,
and we got into the Batcave.
No, not at all, man. The Robin figure, it just didn't look good. The Batman figure didn't look good. Like, none of these looked good.
No.
This was the weakest line that they had. It was the weakest movie and the weakest toy line, which you would think because there was so much influence from the toy makers on this was going to be the best toy line, and it's the exact opposite.
I know, and you have like a Robin with a razor skate. Okay, what the hell is that? Bane looks small compared to what he is in the movie. It actually doesn't look that bad, to be honest.
No, it's the best likeness, but it's the worst scale.
Right.
And scale's a big deal. A lot of people don't understand, when people talk about these figures and stuff like that, and we talk about scale. The difference of it being, if you're supposed to have a guy who is supposed to be gigantic like Bane, and you play with your figures and he's the same height as Batman, it doesn't give off the illusion that he's supposed to be the bigger, brawnier guy. And it ruins everything.
It sure does. And then, was there some kind of shame with Alicia Silverstone as Batgirl? Because whether it's her action figure or the doll that they made, the 12-inch doll, she has the mask on. Like the full like Batgirl mask, but not like the flowing hair like she had in the movie. And obviously, I'm not going to get into the body shaming stuff that went on at that time, but it seemed like they were completely missing the mark on her.
Yeah, absolutely. There was a lot, again, you want to talk about casting. This was the girl from Clueless. All of a sudden, she's in a Batman movie. It was weird, man. And yeah, you're right. There was a lot of stuff that went on with her in that movie. And there was the figures just didn't look anything like her at all. It was like she's got the complete cowl on, and I was like, but that's not the way it was in the film. And you guys helped design these characters and design their new looks. Why aren't you capturing them in your action figures?
It's ridiculous, and I think after the movie came out, I didn't want to go and get another Bruce Wayne. I didn't want to go and buy the ice chamber with that mill place that looked like it was recycled from Star Wars, and and then they still tried to do like sell the 3 vehicles all in one package. They did a cryo freeze chamber, which I think they took from Terminator 2. And yeah, they had a repainted Batcave, the same one from Batman Returns. They just made it blue, So this was really like that turning point where it just Warner realized they were taking it too far. And by the way, the Superman Lives movie that wound up not getting made, Kenner was involved with that too. They had a hand in starting to design costumes and vehicles for that, and thankfully we never got that movie and we never got that toy line.
Yeah, you're not kidding. There's a lot of things that that you can say about the toy lines now. We're seeing the stuff that comes out now, and there's so much of an improvement on some of the ones that we saw in the back in the day because of, like I said, articulation. The idea that size does matter in an action figure. The idea that everybody shouldn't be the same height, everybody shouldn't be the same mold, everybody shouldn't have the same body type. But back in the day, this should have been right here, the turning point for that. We should have gotten that when a toy company was given the free reign to really put their own spin on these characters, and then they weren't showing that within the action figures. I never understood that, and it's something that always stuck out to me when it came to this toy line because it just wasn't living up to an expectation that you would expect. And even now it doesn't. Like, I wish I could sit there and say, oh, we were just mad at the movie, but if you look at the action figure line, it was actually good. It's the opposite. It's worse than you would think, and it's almost worse than the movie.
Yeah, it's just, I mean, that really was the point where I think even in general, because I was just about to go into high school, that's almost like when it really kind of stopped. And, we could get into the Nolan movies, but to be honest, at that point, we really weren't collecting that much anymore. And, Mattel had taken over. And they're still running it now, with the Batman vs. Superman, Justice League. They'll probably do the ones for the Matt Reeves movie coming out. And, they're still kind of doing the same thing, the different variants of the characters and so forth. But there was also, they had like the cinematic line. So they're not only taking the current movies and making figures for them, but now we're starting to get like accurate depictions from past DC movies. So they're doing Superman, they're doing the older Batman films. We're starting to see like the actual Penguin from Batman Returns, not a repainted superpowers figure. So maybe on a brighter side, even though we're not kids today, to see like our kids now having that enjoyment to have those kind of figures. Even looking at my little cousin, who's really big into the Lego Batman movie, that almost brings me kind of back to those days of having the Rogues Gallery together, having like my little Royal Rumbles, and even sometimes the crossovers. Like I would go as far as to take even the DC superpower figures or the Superman figures that Kenner put out in the 90s and have Batman and Superman team up or have them fight each other and do the Justice League. Or even do like a DC and Marvel crossover. So, I mean, there was always that kind of thing that I could do where if I couldn't reenact a movie, I could use my imagination and say, do these little crossovers or have this team up happen. And, and then I can not only use them in Wayne Manor, but I would take like the Ghostbusters firehouse, or I take like this little like Sesame Street house place set from Fisher Price, and I'd start having them all battle each other like it's really Gotham City. So those were really fun days for me.
Yeah, same here. Just to touch on, before I go into what you said, to touch on what you had talked about before, the Mattel line is really doing a great job. And I said I'm going to harken this a lot back to the wrestling figures, but I was really upset when Jakks lost their licensing and Mattel took over because I was like, wait, hold on, this is the company that made Barbie is going to make my wrestling figures now. Because I've never stopped collecting wrestling figures. It's always something that I kept up on. But talk about the, how we played with them back in the day. Because I was a wrestling fan, I used to use all my action figures in my own, in my own little wrestling league. And Batman actually was the Batman that I was talking about with the removable cowl and cape and everything. Bruce Wayne was the backstage interviewer, but he was also Batman. But nobody knew. Like, the quote unquote fans knew, but none of the quote unquote guys in the company knew. So, people would pick on him in the backstage segment, and then Batman would come out and beat the crap out of him. And they'd be like, I don't understand why Batman's attacking me. Bruce Wayne, you must know him. He must be your friend. He's always sticking up for you, kind of a thing. So that was a lot of how I played with them, on top of recreating all this other kind of stuff with recreating movies, making their own storylines. There were times where I was 7, 8, 9, 10 days into like big movies that I was doing where it would start off with one thing and there'd be an action battle sequence here. And then these people came in to help over here and all that kind of stuff. I also used them all in a big wrestling league, and Batman and Robin were my tag team champions for the longest time. They almost never lost the tag titles. And then it was all of them. Like the Ninja Turtles were involved, and the Ghostbusters, and there was a big crossover match at my big event between the Ninja Turtles and the Ghostbusters. They fought each other because that's what you did as a kid. You got to recreate your own kind of things, and you did your own stuff, and it was a lot of fun. Those were some of the better memories that I had as a kid. Using all these action figures, introducing, like, if they came to the ring, Batman came out in his Batmobile with Robin in the passenger seat, and the Ninja Turtles came out in the Ninja Turtle van. And the Ghostbusters had, like, they were firehouse matches because I had the big Ghostbusters firehouse. That's what it was all about, and that's what it's all about now for us. Being collectors, seeing the next generation take over as kids who are now playing with these toys. That's what brings us the most enjoyment. And I look back fondly on the early Batman toys because they were some of the first action figures I really played with religiously.
Yeah, and same here. That's really what I think enhanced what I was doing, and and I guess as we start to wrap this up, I would want to also, this is also maybe like a new thing we'll add for this show going forward, is, with each line, like what figures we would have loved to have seen, as kids. Because there's always, with every film, there's always like characters or vehicles or even play sets that you wish you would have had back then. And whether they've made them now or not, like it just would have added something extra special to our childhood. So I know for me, when it came to the Batman figures, I wish not only that we would get a penguin that looked like Danny DeVito, but I would have loved to have seen like an Alfred figure that looked like the actor Michael Grove from the original films. I would have loved to have gotten like the penguin duck boat. Or even like a play set of the Chemical Axis Factory, or even the cathedral scene at the end of the first one. If you had something like that to recreate that battle with like trap floors and like a bell that you could bang the Joker onto, that would have been freaking amazing. And so those were things I would have liked to have seen back then that obviously they weren't prepared to do, or maybe they planned but never released. What would you say you would have loved to have seen back then?
You totally stole my answer, or one of my answers, with Alfred. That was always one that I always wanted, because when you played in the play set, you wanted to have Alfred there, helping him out and doing whatever, and the man in the chair. Also, James Gordon.
Yeah, James Gordon. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, Harvey Bullock, it was in the animated series. I always thought that would have been cool too. But Commissioner Gordon was a big deal in all the Batman stories, and I would have loved to have a Commissioner Gordon figure.
Yeah.
As far as vehicles, I think they kind of nailed most of them. Like the ones that you had mentioned, I would say, yeah, that was, they were, those were kind of on point. Other than that, I really would have liked to have seen just a more definitive, better looking series for, even though the movie wasn't that bad, Batman and Robin movie. I just really would have liked to have a much better Bane than what we got, because the figure was nice, but it needed to be bigger in scale.
I agree. Also coming to mind to me too is I would have loved to have seen a Billy D. Williams Harvey Dent figure, or even if they did like some sort of interpretation of what his Two-Face would have looked like if he had stayed in the part.
Yes.
Yeah, and I would have loved to have a Christopher Walken figure as Max Schreck. And that would be like the only Christopher Walken figure in world history ever created.
And if anybody else in the world deserves to have their own figure made, it's Christopher Walken.
Exactly, yes. And also, they should have definitely have done the Penguin's henchmen. And I think it was probably the same problem, that they were just too creepy looking. But still,
yeah,
for that Batman Returns line, I'm sorry, the Penguins were not enough. You had to have some guys for him to battle against, because I wasn't going to have my Batman fight a bunch of cute little penguins.
Yeah, that was a big thing that and that was one of those things that I wound up asking all my relatives for when I was a kid. For the Ninja Turtle line, they came out with the foot soldiers, and you needed 15 foot soldiers because the Ninja Turtles had to battle all of them. And I wound up having like 3 or 4 of them, and that was always like a big deal. It was like, all right, now they fight all the foot soldiers to get them out of the way, and then we can get to Shredder. You need that kind of stuff as kids. You want multiples of a lot of these figures, or even if it showed like a little differentiation of like henchman 1, henchman 2, henchman 3. You want to get all these so that you can really recreate these things. And yeah, that was a big deal. They really should have done more of that.
Yeah, and I also feel like if Toy Biz had kept the line, and let's say if there wasn't such a backlash against Bob the Goon, I think you would have also seen some of the other Joker henchmen in that part as well. I think maybe like the big black dude that beats the crap out of him in the bell tower, you would have seen his figure come out. And that could have been a cool thing to have. Or even like the Jack Palance character from the first with Grissom. They could have easily have done a Jack Palance toy, and that could have been a collector's item right there.
Yeah, there was a lot of missed opportunities back in the day. I think that it was because we were in the infancy of, we weren't 100% sure about how these were going to sell, that they probably didn't make some of the lesser known characters. But nowadays, this is something that, it can be, it is really being rectified, and we're getting figures of just about everyone. And when there's a backlash, and I think it's warranted. I know that for Marvel, there was a big set that got released after, I want to say maybe the first or second Avengers movie, and Black Widow wasn't in there. I believe it was Black Widow and Hawkeye were both missing, and everybody was like, all right, come on, guys. Like, let's get everybody in there. And they wound up recreating a different set and including everybody in there. And that's what we need. We want to see everybody. We want an interpretation, a likeness of everybody that's going to be in those movies, big or small, no matter what size their roles are. And we're getting a lot more of that now. I wish we would have gotten that back when we were kids.
Yeah, and speaking of the female figures, I mean, I definitely would have liked to have seen like a Vicky Vale toy, even if it wasn't sold separately. It could have been like part of a playset package. Like if they had like the bell tower and it's her in that blue dress that she wore in the film, or even like a Selena Kyle toy that, much like with Bruce Wayne, put the thing over her and she's Catwoman. That could have been a cool collector's item.
I agree. I feel like, and it's like what you said, female action figures didn't sell as well as the male action figures, and I think that might be why we didn't get all of those. And now what I really like is, this is something that Mattel has started doing, and it's something that the Marvel action figure lines have started doing, where some of the lesser known characters are now being put in as Build-A-Figures, which is a really cool concept, where if you collect the entire line, you can build Solomon Grundy, and they'll give you different pieces of them, and you can build them, within that set. And Mattel's doing that with the wrestling lines. Like I said, the DC and Marvel lines are doing that with some of their bigger lines. And, that's something that, I wish back in the day we had the ability to do, because it would have been cool to have like a Vicky Vale. And even if she wouldn't have sold, you could have had her because you would have bought the entire set.
Exactly. Yeah. Yes, I mean that's basically all we could really say about Batman, and I know there's probably some stuff we missed out on, some figures we didn't talk about, but that's where you viewers and listeners will come in. We're always open to suggestions and ideas for future episodes. I already have a list, but we're always open to that. Any feedback is always appreciated. So if you want to contact me, or even just to find out a little bit more about myself, the movies that I do, you can go to my website, ajepyxproductions.com. That's AJ Epics Productions. And all my films are available on Vimeo on demand, as well as on Amazon. And also, you can email me at ajepics1@gmail.com if you want to contact me directly. And also, I have my Twitter, which is at ajepics, and also the same handle on Instagram.
Right, and if you want to interact with me or listen to some of the podcasts that I do every Monday night, if you're a wrestling fan, go to youtube.com and type in Dave Knows Wrestling. That's the Dave Knows Wrestling live stream. Dave and I get together and we do our own YouTube live stream where we watch Monday Night Raw and talk about wrestling. WrestlingWithWrestling.com. You can find some of the work that Dave and I do for the Slam Sessions podcast, which is my personal podcast. And if you have anything where you want to hear me cover, it's facebook.com// the Slam Sessions Podcast Network. Hit me up there, or on Twitter at KYD_85, or maybe it's just KYD Flash. I gotta get that down. I can never get my Twitter handle down because I don't use it enough. I actually talk about action figures on my Twitter for the most part. So find me on there and talk action figures with me over there. And yeah, whatever you want to hear, let Andre know. And hopefully myself or someone else will co-host with Andre and cover some of your favorite toy lines.
Yeah, and hopefully, well, I mean, we'll have this up on the AJ Epics YouTube channel. Eventually, we may have our own separate pages for this on Facebook and on Twitter and so forth. But we're hoping in the future, we're not only going to do just vintage movie toy lines, but we'll also delve into some television ones. Hoping we'll get some interviews with some actual people that worked for these companies, and and we're gonna kind of rotate the hosts every now and then, because obviously there's some things I know Albert can't talk about with certain toy lines that maybe somebody else I know might be able to get into. So that's going to be kind of a recurring pattern. But give us your feedback, guys, because it's absolutely always appreciated. We really want to see this grow and expand. We're having fun doing this, and it's a really nice hobby. So I know there's a lot of collectors out there that want to have more information about these toys, hear our experiences, and if you know of anything about prototypes or any figures that we're looking for personally, send us the info too, because I got plenty of lines I'd like to finish up at this age.
Yeah, you're not kidding. Believe me, if anybody has anything to do with any of the Hasbro WWE figures that wants to sell them for me, or just maybe donate them to a better home. Hi, I'm right here.
Yes, Hasbro Orange cards. Contact me.
Forget about it. Anything at this point. My Hasbro collection is still looking a little weak, Andre.
Yeah, June. All right.
Yeah, mean a lot. Yeah.
All right, guys, so this is the Silver Screen Action Figure Podcast. Andre Joseph signing off.